let the president hand the country's national assets to his friends. That's the kind of corruption we want you to focus on. Then I would go with that. So again, I'm sort of portraying my relativist colors here, but that's actually how I'd resolve those kinds of issues. And actually, can I just say a word about that? And I think that's the current anti-corruption initiatives are lacking to some extent for that reason, because you might have seen in the newspapers, there have been some very substantial fines levied on Western companies, Western multinationals in the past few months, basically. 1.6 billion, I think, is what Siemens paid to the US and EU regulators for paying bribes to obtain contracts around the world, actually. And Halliburton and Alstom are also being investigated. And so there's been a lot of activity on this front. And I think that's probably all for the best. But the kind of corruption that's being targeted by those prosecutions is the kind of corruption where firms are paying bribes to obtain an advantage in securing contracts with governments. So it's to obtain some sort of competitive advantage over other Western firms. That's a problem, and there are reasons why that's disadvantageous for the developing countries. But it's not clear that it's a worse problem in the world, right? There are other forms of corruption that I think are more pernicious from the perspective of the developing countries, and that don't actually attract the attention of Western prosecutors to the same extent. So to the extent that I'm interested in taking this research to focus it on anti-corruption legislation, I'm interested in trying to devise mechanisms that allow prosecutions to be driven more by the interests of the host countries and their concerns about corruption than by the concerns of, say, the US government about leveling the playing field for its firms.
Hi, my name's Chaya Mandelbaum. My question is, do you think that the universalist arguments are gaining any traction in the context of globalization? And to go back to the European Union example, if you look just, I don't know the specifics within each country, but on a theoretical level, let's take Germany, for instance. If Germany has a specific legal approach that works within Germany, and that would be the optimal solution that was sort of catered specifically to Germany, if it's going to adversely affect their interactions with, say, France with a different legal system, then if there's enough dealings between Germany and France in a globalized system that even internal to Germany, this universalist approach then becomes an optimal system, even if strictly domestically it's that approach, it doesn't behoove them.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a distinction between the kind of universalist argument that I'm addressing, that I'm critiquing, which says that there's one solution that's optimal for each country, each society, taken independently, treating it as an independent actor. That's different from an argument basically in favor of harmonization, which suggests that because these countries are interacting, a harmonized solution is optimal, not because it's best for any of them independently, but because of the interaction to reduce the transaction costs of discovering the laws of foreign countries. You might want to have one size fits all. That argument I haven't addressed. My instinct is that the gains from harmonization are not significant enough in all of these areas across the board to justify one-size-fits-all approaches to, say, debt collection, right, or starting a business, or even the law of secured transactions. Lawyers are pretty good at sort of hiring local counsel who will figure out what it takes to take a security interest. So my instinct is that those gains from harmonization are not substantial enough to rebut, to override these objections. But you're quite right to say that I haven't addressed that argument explicitly.
Kevin, thank you very much. This was a wonderful lecture. This is a perfect lecture for the Global Law School. We talked about universalism, we talked about contextualism, we talked about harmonization, we talked about whose standards of corruption should govern in sort of international business dealings. We really hit on some of the really, really meaty issues. And as you can see, there's a lot to discuss. I know a great book is going to come out of all this at some point. But more immediately, the conversations can all continue in the back of the room through drinks. You're all invited. I want to, again, give special thanks to Kevin's family who came from Canada, his father Claude and his mother Marcy and brother and aunt. And, Very grateful to Kevin's wife, Guylaine, who is a very distinguished lawyer and has dealt with many of these issues in her professional capacity. Thank you for coming to hear Kevin. Very grateful again to Gary and Carol and Jesse and all your family, especially Carol's mother. Very grateful to you for coming. So let's continue the conversation. If you want to get CLE credit for Kevin's talk, which you can do that, you need to pick up your evaluation form, which is in your chair, and at some point drop it off in the desk outside, and then you will even get CLE credit. Thanks again for a wonderful evening.